The General Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mr. Hugo Chavez Frias, President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Mr. Hugo Chavez Frias, President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Excellencies, heads of state, heads of government and high representatives of the governments of the world. Good morning to all of you. First of all, I want to respectfully invite those who have not been able to read this book to read it. Noam Chomsky, one of the most prestigious intellectuals of this America and the world. Chomsky, one of his most recent works, Hegemony or Survival. Hegemony or Survival. The imperialist strategy of the United States. Excellent work to understand what has happened in the world, the 20th century, what is happening today and the greatest threat that looms over our planet. The hegemonic claim of US imperialism puts the very survival of the human species at risk. We continue to warn of that danger and call on the people of the United States and the world to stop this threat, which is like the sword of Damocles itself. I was thinking of reading a chapter, but to respect the time, I'd rather leave it with a recommendation. It reads quickly. That is very good, Madam President. Surely you know him. It is published in English, in German, in Russian, in Arabic. Surely. Look, I think the first citizens who should read this book are the citizens, brothers and sisters of the United States, because the threat is in their own home. The devil is at home, then. The devil himself, is at home. Yesterday the devil came here. Yesterday the devil was here. In this same place. It still smells like sulfur. This table where I have had to speak. Yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, from this very rostrum, the President of the United States, whom I call the devil, came here speaking as the master of the world. As owner of the world. A psychiatrist would not be out of place to analyze yesterday's speech by the President of the United States. As a spokesman for imperialism, he came to give his prescriptions. To try to maintain the current scheme of domination, exploitation and plundering of the peoples of the world. For an Alfred Hitchcock film, it would be good. I would even propose a title. The Devil's Recipe. That is to say, US imperialism, and here Chomsky says it, with crystal clear and profound clarity, is making desperate efforts to consolidate its hegemonic system of domination. We cannot allow that to happen. We cannot allow the world dictatorship to be installed. Let it be consolidated, then. That the world dictatorship be consolidated. The speech of the world tyrannical president, full of cynicism, full of hypocrisy. It is imperial hypocrisy, the attempt to control everything. They want to impose the democratic model on us. As they conceive it, the false democracy of the elites. And also a very original democratic model, imposed by bombs, bombings, and at the point of invasions and cannon fire. Wow, what a democracy. Aristotle's theses should be revised, right? And one of the first to speak back in Greece about democracy. Let's see what model of democracy is the one that is imposed at the point of marines, invasions, aggressions, and bombs. The President of the United States says the following yesterday, in this very room. I quote, "Everywhere you look, you hear extremists telling you that you can escape misery and regain your dignity through violence, terror, and martyrdom. Everywhere he looks, he sees extremists. I'm sure he sees you, brother, with that color, and thinks you're an extremist. With this color, Evo Morales, who came yesterday, the worthy president of Bolivia, is an extremist. Everywhere they see extremists, the imperialists. No, it's not that we're extremists. What is happening is that the world is waking up and people are rising up everywhere. I have the impression, Mr. Imperialist Dictator, that you are going to live the rest of your days as a nightmare, because wherever you look, we are going to emerge, those of us who rise up against US imperialism, those of us who cry out for the full freedom of the world, for the equality of the United States. Peoples, for respect for the sovereignty of nations. Yes, they call us extremists. We rise up against the empire, we rise up against the model of domination." Then, Mr. President came to talk to him. This is what he said. "Today I want to speak directly to the people of the Middle East. My country wants peace. This is true. If we go through the streets of the Bronx, if we go through the streets of New York, Washington, San Diego, California, any city, San Antonio, San Francisco, and we ask the people in the streets, the American citizens, this country wants to. La paz. The difference is that the government of this country, of the United States, does not want peace. It wants to impose its model of exploitation and plunder and its hegemony at the point of wars. That's the small difference. He wants peace. And what is happening in Iraq? And what has happened in Lebanon and Palestine? And what has happened in 100 years, then, in Latin America and in the world? And now the threats against Venezuela, new threats against Venezuela, new threats against Iran. He spoke to the people of Lebanon. Many of you, he said, have seen your homes and your communities caught in the crossfire. Wow, what cynicism. Wow, what a capacity to lie shamelessly to the world. The bombs in Beirut and dropped with pinpoint precision a crossfire. I think the president is thinking of Western movies, when you shot yourself from the waist and someone was caught in the crossfire. Imperialist fire, fascist fire, murderous fire and genocidal fire. That of the empire and that of Israel against the innocent people of Palestine and the people of Lebanon. That's the truth. Now they say that they suffer, that we are suffering because we see their homes destroyed. In short, the President of the United States came to speak to the people. He came to speak to the people. He also said, "Madam President, I brought some documents, didn't I? Because I was watching some speeches and updating my words this morning." He spoke to the people of Afghanistan. To the people of Lebanon, to the people of Iran I say, to the people of Lebanon I say, to the people of Afghanistan I say. Well, one wonders, just as the President of the United States says, I tell him, to those peoples, what would those peoples say to him? If those people could talk, what would they say to him? I am going to pick him up for you, because I know most of the soul of those peoples, the peoples of the South, the peoples who have been run over. Say, Yankee Empire, go home. That would be the cry that would spring up everywhere if the peoples of the world could speak with one voice to the Empire of the United States. That is why, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, we came here to this very chamber last year, as we have done every year for the last 8. And we were saying something that is now fully confirmed, and I believe that almost no one in this room here could stand up to defend it, to defend the United Nations system. Let's accept it with honesty. The United Nations system, born after the Second World War, collapsed, it is useless. Well, to come here to give speeches, to see each other once a year. Yes, that's what it's for. And to make very long documents and make good reflections and listen to good speeches, like Ivo's yesterday, like Lula's. Yes, that's what it's for. And many speeches, the one we were hearing right now from the President of Sri Lanka and the President of Chile. But they have turned this assembly into a merely deliberative body, merely deliberative, without any kind of power to impact in the slightest way the terrible reality that the world is experiencing. That is why we propose again, Venezuela proposes again here today, this September 20th, that we refound the United Nations. And last year, Madam President, we made 4 modest proposals that we consider, well, of urgent need for us to take them on. Well, the heads of state, the heads of government, our ambassadors, our representatives, and let's discuss them. First, the expansion, as Lula said yesterday right here, of the Security Council, both in its permanent and non-permanent categories, giving entry to new developed countries and underdeveloped countries, the Third World, as new permanent members. That in the first place. Secondly, well, the application of effective methods of dealing with and resolving world conflicts, transparent methods of debate, of decisions. Third, we believe that the immediate abolition of, and this is a clamor of all, of, that anti-democratic mechanism of the veto is fundamental. The veto in the decisions of the Security Council. Here is a recent example. The immoral veto of the United States government freely allowed Israeli forces to smash Lebanon in the face, in front of all of us, avoiding a resolution in the United Nations Security Council. And fourthly, it is necessary to strengthen, we always say, the role, the attributions of the Secretary General of the United Nations. Yesterday the Secretary General gave us a speech, practically as a farewell, and he recognized that in these 10 years what the world has done is to complicate itself and that the serious problems of the world, hunger, misery, violence, the violation of human rights, what it has done is to worsen. This is a terrible consequence, well, of the collapse of the United Nations system and of the US imperialist pretension. On the other hand, Madam President, Venezuela decided several years ago to wage this battle within the United Nations, recognizing the United Nations as the members that we are, with our voice, with our modest reflections. We are an independent voice to represent dignity and the search for peace, the reformulation of the international system, to denounce the persecution and aggressions of hegemonism against the peoples of the planet. Venezuela, in this way, has presented its name. This homeland of Bolivar has submitted its name and has applied for one seat as a non-permanent member of the Security Council. Who knows, the government of the United States has initiated an open aggression, an immoral aggression throughout the world, to try to prevent Venezuela from being freely elected to occupy a seat on the Security Council. They are afraid of the truth. The empire is afraid of the truth, of independent voices, accusing us of being extremists. They are the extremists. I want to thank here all those countries that have announced their support for Venezuela, even though the vote is secret and it is not necessary for anyone to announce it. But I believe that given the open aggression of the US empire, that accelerated the support of many countries, which strengthens Venezuela a lot, well, morally, our people and our government. Mercosur, for example, as a bloc, has announced its support for Venezuela, our brothers in Mercosur. Venezuela is now a full member of Mercosur with Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and many other Latin American countries such as Bolivia. The CARICOM as a whole announced its support for Venezuela. The Arab League. The entire Arab League announced its support for Venezuela. I am very grateful to the Arab world, to our brothers in Arabia, to our brothers in the Caribbean. The African Union, almost all of Africa announced its support for Venezuela and countries, well, like Russia, like China and many other countries on the planet. Thank you very much on behalf of Venezuela, on behalf of our people and on behalf of the truth, because Venezuela, by occupying a seat on the Security Council, is going to bring the voice not only of Venezuela, the voice of the Third World, the voice of the peoples of the planet. There we will be defending dignity and truth. Beyond all this, Madam President, I believe that there are reasons for us to be optimistic. Unwaveringly optimistic, a poet would say. Because beyond the threats, the bombs, the wars, the aggressions, the preventive war, the destruction of entire peoples, one can see that a new era is rising. As Sylvia Rodriguez sings, the era is giving birth to a heart. Alternative currents, alternative thoughts, alternative movements, young people with different thoughts are rising. It was already demonstrated in barely a decade that the thesis of the end of history was totally false. The thesis of the establishment of the American empire, of the Pax Americana, is totally false. The establishment of the neoliberal capitalist model that generates misery and poverty is totally false. It fell apart. Now we have to define the future of the world. There is a dawn on the planet and it is seen everywhere, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in Oceania. I want to highlight that vision of optimism so that we strengthen our conscience and our will to fight to save the world and build a new world, a better world. Venezuela joins that fight and that is why we are threatened. The United States has already planned, financed and promoted a coup d'etat in Venezuela, and the United States continues to support coup movements in Venezuela and against Venezuela. It continues to support terrorism. President Michelle Bachelet already recalled a few days ago, excuse me, a few minutes ago, the horrible murder of former Chilean Foreign Minister Orlando Letelier. I would only add the following. The culprits are free and the culprits of that event, where an American citizen also died, are Americans, CIA terrorists, CIA terrorists. But in addition, it must be remembered in this room that in a few days it will also be 30 years since that horrifying terrorist act of the bombing of the Cuban airliner, where 73 innocent people died. The Cubana de aviation plane. And where is the greatest terrorist on this continent and who assumed the blowing up of the Cuban plane is the intellectual author? He was imprisoned in Venezuela for a few years. He escaped there with the complicity of CIA officials and the Venezuelan government at the time. He's here living in the United States protected by this government, and he was convicted and confessed. The United States government has double standards and protects terrorism. These reflections to say that Venezuela is committed to the fight against terrorism, against violence, and joins all the peoples who fight for peace and for a world of equals. I have spoken of the Cuban plane. Luis Posada Carolis is called the terrorist. It is protected here, as great corrupt people who fled Venezuela are protected here. A group of terrorists who planted bombs against embassies of several countries, who murdered people there during the coup d'etat, kidnapped this humble servant and were going to shoot him. Only that God got his hand and a group of good soldiers and the people who went to the streets. And miraculously, I'm here. They are here, protected by the United States government, the leaders of that coup d'etat and those terrorist acts. I accuse the US government of harboring terrorism and having a totally cynical discourse. We are talking about Cuba. We come from Havana. We come from Havana happy. We were there for several days and there you can see the birth of a new era. The summit of the Group of 15. The summit of the non-aligned movement. With a historic resolution. Final document. Don't be scared, I'm not going to read it all, am I? But here is a set of resolutions taken in open discussion and with transparency by more than 50 heads of state. Havana was the capital of the South for a week. We have relaunched the non-aligned group, the non-aligned movement, and if there is one thing I can ask here of all of you, comrades and brothers and sisters, it is that we put a lot of will into strengthening the non-aligned group, which is very important for the birth of the new era. To avoid hegemony and imperialism. And besides, you know that we have appointed Fidel Castro as chairman of the non-aligned group for the next 3 years. And we are sure that Comrade President Fidel Castro is going to take the baton with great efficiency. For those who wanted Fidel to die, they were frustrated and frustrated they will be, because Fidel is already uniformed again in olive green, and now he is not only the president of Cuba, but the president of the non-aligned. Madam President, dear fellow presidents, a very strong movement was born there, that of the South. We are men and women of the South. We are bearers of these documents, with these ideas, with these criticisms, with these reflections, that I close my folder and take the book with me. Do not forget that I recommend them a lot, with great humility. We try to contribute ideas for the salvation of this planet, to save it from the imperialist threat and so that, hopefully soon, in this century, not too late, hopefully we can see it and our children and grandchildren live it better, a world of peace, under the fundamental principles of the United Nations. United, but relaunched. Relaunched and relocated. I think that at the United Nations we have to locate them in another country, in some city in the south. We have proposed from Venezuela. You know that my personal doctor had to be locked in the plane. The head of my security had to stay locked in the plane. They were not allowed, to come to the United Nations. Another abuse and outrage, Madam President, that we ask from Venezuela to be registered as an outrage even personal. From the devil. It smells like sulfur, but God is with us. A good hug. And may God bless us all. Good morning.
En nombre de the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while the Deputy Secretary General and IASCO escort the President.